The Lions travel to Queensland. I feel like this is just another step in getting 10% better from when they first came together. A little bit more of improvements throughout the squad. Still some working points. I genuinely feel that the Argentina game will probably see the Lions at 40%. I think the last game, or the first game they had in Australia, but the last game they played against the Western Force, they were probably at 50%. And now I'm starting to see them at 60%. Things are starting to happen a little bit more often. Cohesiveness and attack and defence starts to come on a little bit earlier on in the game. Again, it was a bit of a sluggish start, but rather than having to wait fully for the second half, the Lions had it a little bit more together in the first half, towards the tail end. But what I will start with talking about, I think, is the Queensland Reds, because, surprise, surprise, as a British and Irish Lions fan myself, a lot of the talk is going to be about them, their selection, and where we're building towards the Wallabies. So Queensland Reds, I think it was a much better performance than the Western Force put up. Not that the Western Force played badly, but I think that was to be expected. Queensland Reds, better side, but they did have some notable exceptions within their team. Tom Lynagh being one of them. Tate McDermott, another. Tom Lynagh not being involved in this squad, to me, is a nice surprise. I really wanted to see Tom Lynagh play against the Lions. I'm going to be looking keenly this weekend to see if he plays against Fiji for the Wallabies, starting in that 10 shirt. He's had an unbelievable season for the Queensland Reds. He's allergic to kicking the ball. He wants to run it from wherever he is on the pitch. And it's very interesting that he's just not been included in this Queensland Reds squad at all. He's been just given to the Wallabies squad. Maybe I'm missing some information. Maybe he's injured. But for me, if you watch my videos going back to the Autumn Nations series last year, I felt like Australia were just a world-class 10 away from being a world-class team. I felt like their pack was playing at a very high level. I think like they arguably have some of the best front row players in Angus, Bell and Tupou. Their second rows were great as well. Fraser McReight and Harry Wilson, who are not in this Queensland Reds team, I think are also very good back rowers, incredibly mobile, great jackalers. Harry Wilson in particular, very good with ball in hand. But yeah, Tom Lynagh not being included in this team says to me they really seriously are considering him to be playing him in this Lions tour. The players that did play today, I thought the 9, I believe his name's Thomas, I think he had an excellent game. That try he set up by kicking through the defensive line, great vision. He was always quick with the ball. I think it's unfortunate that he plays scrum half. There's so many good scrum halves for the Wallabies to select. Tate McDermott, as I said, has already won. I think there's rumours that Jake Gordon's probably going to be the captain of the squad. And I think Nick White did put up a better performance last week for the Western Force and is probably that third choice scrum half. So it's going to be a bit tough for Thomas to get in. I think the front rowers for the Queensland Reds put their case forward for being included in the squad. And last but not least, Paisami, Hunter Paisami. It's a classic rugby Illuminati, can't pronounce the name. I think he was excellent today. I think even though he's played a full 80 minutes today, I fully expect him to be the out-and-out 12 for the Wallabies. Presuming that Seru will be playing at 13. They played together during the Autumn Nations. I think they were a great centre partnership. One being a lot more of a direct runner. One being a lot more, wily, good under the high ball and tricksy. So that was the Queensland Reds. A better performance, as I said, than the Western Force put forward. But then we have the Lions. Again, bit of a clunky start. There were knock-ons, people not sure where people were running. Some of the moves didn't really come off. The improvisation plays in terms of pop off the round, the back and looping. And I remember specifically one in particular where Elliot Daly went in for the corner and tried to pass it behind him. And the move just didn't work very well. We'll get into Elliot Daly later in his injury and talk about that. But after a little bit of time, everything stopped being as clunky in attack. And they managed to find a rhythm and they had some real pieces of attack that was fantastic. I think some of the best attack they had was when Bundyaki was just running directly as a direct runner, which then opened up space on the outside. And something that I'm noticing in this Lions attack is, I think that's what they're going to be looking to do. Inside runners and then looping passes outside so that they can take advantage of the strengths they have in this squad. You could argue that they have some of the best wingers in the world in this squad. Duhan van der Merwe, who I'm going to talk about later for various reasons. Tommy Freeman today, who I think is excellent. James Lowe in this squad as well. Mac Hansen. These are all, they are world-class. There's so many world-class wingers, but That's what there is a big strength in this squad. So many really quality wingers. Drawing men on the inside, getting that space from the outside, and trusting your playmakers when they're one-on-one or they're two-on-one to make a play on the outside. I think in terms of playmakers, if we're talking about that, which I just did in terms of getting playmakers in positions to get the wingers space, boy, I think there's two positions that this early on in the tour are marked up to be, these will be the test starters, unless there's injury. And I think that's Jamison Gibson-Park and Finn Russell. Jamison Gibson-Park has his first British and Irish Lions start in this tour, and he took the position by force. I thought it was a real shame that Thomas Williams got injured. I thought he was the in-form 9 for the Lions, but Gibson-Park comes in today and I think has a complete commanding performance. And it was the same thing, I think, that when Finn Russell came into this British and Irish Lions squad last weekend, and the chemistry that he just automatically had with everyone around them, no matter what nation they were from or what club they played from, really spoke volumes. Gibson-Park also had that offensive line just having a bit more spark, got the ball out just half a second quicker than anybody else in the world other than DuPont. And I think that did a big job in terms of getting the Lions out on the front foot. Finn Russell, again, he's another name that I think he's going to be starting for the British and Irish Lions at this stage. So good in attack. His distribution, ball in hand, is excellent. His vision, his speed, the decision of where to put the ball, to draw the defence and really manipulate them in a fashion where it opens up space for the playmakers. A really, really solid performance from him. I think, yeah, I don't expect Finn Russell to be playing at all next weekend. I expect the other fly halves to be given a go. We'll talk about them later. So many talking points I've got to try and remember when we get to them. Centre partnership, I think Aki and Hugh Jones was a little bit ropey. Not a huge amount of understanding to start off with. But they found a rhythm, I think, towards the end, especially in the second half. And as I've said, I think I attribute a lot to that, to Bundy Aki just run it straight. Just go direct. I think the back three were also pretty good. Doohan, Tommy Freeman, Elliot Daly. We'll start with Doohan. So, there's no doubt that when Doohan touches the ball and has the ball in hand, he is one of the most dangerous men on the planet with ball in hand. There's no doubt about it. But whenever I see that and I watch that, I can't help but think of the defensive... How do I put this? The defensive mishaps that he comes up with. I'm thinking of the high ball early in the first half. I'm thinking of Argentina where he got stepped on an inside line. Something just screams to me that it just feels like it's too much of a weakness for him to be getting that starting wing shirt. And for that reason, I think it should be James Lowe on one wing, and I think Tommy Freeman should be on the other. Tommy Freeman has gone from strength to strength. Yes, he made mistakes today. There was 1 or 2 knock-ons. There was a high ball missed. But there's no doubt that he's got the attacking and the defensive acumen to be this British and Irish Lions test starter. And then there's Elliot Daly, who, again, this is a sad story, much like Thomas Williams. We're recording this later in the evening. I've had work today. I've had to watch the game after work. But the advantage of that is having a bit more knowledge and news about what's happened. The understanding is that Elliot Daly has broken his forearm. I think that's what the initial reporting is. And that's such a shame because he came in for Hugo Keenan, who was injured. And I think he's really played well at 15 for all the games that he's played there. Marcus Smith starting against Argentina, but against the Western Force and the Queensland Reds, Elliot Daly at that 15 shirt, I think, has been really steady. Like 8 out of 10 performances, which is what Hugo Keenan's known for doing for Ireland, right? Him getting a broken forearm and his tour being ended at that point is, it's a crusher. A lot of people didn't think he would be going on this tour. I did pick him to be going on this tour just because of that utility he has in the back line. But he has been excellent, I think, in the first 2 games. And for him to go injured, get out, and not be included in the tour anymore is a real shame. But it brings the question of who's going to come in to replace him. You know, there's a few options. Do you go for a pure 15, which I think maybe you probably have to? Blair Kinghorn's only just come into the squad. I expect him to probably be playing fullback on Saturday if Hugo Keenan's not healthy enough. And, you know, if you've already got 1-15 that's having questionable health issues at this stage, he wasn't in the URC final for Leinster. He hasn't played since then. It's been a few weeks now. So I don't believe it's just a small injury that's week to week. you kind of need to bring in a 15 that's a 15 all out, can play it. You know, Marcus Smith, I think can fill in that position, but there's better choices out there. And there's a few players that I think could be coming in. I think Blair Murray for Wales is an option. I think George Furbank is another, but that depends on his health. He came back from injury for the Champions Cup final, I believe, and he went out very early, re-aggravating an injury that he had. But I think he's probably the first choice to come in and fill in for Elliot Daly if he is out. The other choice, I think, past that as well, is probably Freddie Stewart, who's, you know, he is a player that's very good at one thing. He is the high ball guy. And to be fair, one of the weaknesses of the Lions right now is, you know, being good under the high ball. So maybe he gets brought in and selected for that reason. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. We don't know everything about the Daly situation right now, so we'll park that. That's just my thoughts thinking about it initially. Talked a lot about the backs. Let's talk a little bit about the forwards. Bit more of my wheelhouse anyway. So I think the front row actually struggled quite a lot this game. There were scrum penalties that went against them. Stewart in particular, you know, I think there was an argument that the loose head was coming in at an angle on him, but, you know, I don't know if that was 100% sure. I definitely think he did get a little bit dominated in that scrum. And in the loose, he you know, that's not what he's known for. He can ball carry. You know, he had that famous step that came out of nowhere, I think, against Italy in the last Six Nations. But, you know, he's known for his scrummaging. That is his kind of out and out. And anything else you get out of him is a bonus. He'll be great in the tight in terms of the maul, lifting the line out and the scrum. So if you're getting dominated at the scrum, that's not good news. And I just think that Tide Furlong, I think, played better last weekend. I think Finlay Bealham has played the best, which is funny because he wasn't even included in the tour squad before Xander Fagerson was injured. But it wasn't a great game for Stewart, I don't think. Ronan Kelleher made some mistakes in line-out throwing as well. Dan Sheehan's probably the only other name in this squad that I think is like stamped on will be starting for the Lions, barring injuries. But I think it's a really interesting competition between Kelleher and Cowan Dickey at this point. I think there were some flashes of greatness from Kelleher. I think the good thing about Kelleher is just that his work rate around the park. I think he's great at picking up loose ball and running directly and straight, and just, you know, he's very quick and reactive in that regard, deceivingly quick for a hooker. And I think Cowan Dickey brings in a bit of brunt and a bit of muscle. So you've got a bit of choices there, and it's really going to be a battle between them for who's fighting for that sub shirt for the tests. Loose head prop, I thought Porter had a bit of a quiet game, hit some rucks. Scrum, again, was a bit hit and miss. But at this point, I'm starting to think that Ellis Genge is maybe the out-and-out star for this test series. His game against Argentina was truly special, not only in the scrum, but also in the loose as well. I thought he was excellent. And then we talk about the second rows. Boy, have we been waiting for this performance from Maro Itoje. I think Maro Itoje has been excellent in the Six Nations for England. For Saracens, he's had a great year. Argentina, he was a little bit quiet, and he wasn't even included in the squad for the Western Force. But boy, today, this was a different performance. Line out, steals galore. He was also turnover galore in the open field play. He was everywhere today. A real captain's performance. And I think it quiets a lot of what I thought was probably ridiculous talk of him no longer being captain and no longer being the starting second row in the tour test. I think he put a lot of that to bed today and showed he's still at the peak of his performance and the peak of his game. Chesham was in the second row for him, who I thought had a good game. Classically very mobile for being in a 5 shirt, can play 5 and 6. But I definitely think the Lions missed quite a bit of grunt in that second row shirt that Joe McCarthy brought last weekend. As I said, the Lions, I think, are really missing, other than Joe McCarthy, what I determine as a big fucker. And Chesham, he's a big guy, but he's not just like an enforcer that you can have like Joe McCarthy. And I think a lot of that showed in the early defence for the Lions in the first half. You think about the Queensland Reds in the first half, they had a surprisingly very high conversion rate from entries into the 22 to scoring tries. And I think a lot of that was getting beaten physically at point of contact. That's in terms of like running with ball. They managed to get consistent gain line success and managed to get over it. And I do think a lot of that was probably a bit of a size deficit that the Lions are probably struggling for a little bit. So for me at the moment, I think Joe McCarthy has to be in this starting test series just because of that big guy factor. I think Jack Morgan, open side flanker, is really putting his name forward for selection for the test series. Obviously, I think Van der Fleer had a great game against the Western Force, but Jack Morgan, I think, was everywhere today. Ball carrying was excellent. You know, he had a few jackals in the second half as well. His work rate is always very, very high. Conan at 8, I think, was excellent. Did a good job of putting the Lions on the front foot. I think he played better than Pollock at 8 last week. And Tom Curry had a bit of an up and down game. I think there were points where he was excellent. He was, you know, doing the grunt work, getting stuck in. But then there was just a few knock-ons where his handling just did not look as smooth and as swift as the rest of the team around him. And that could be a factor for maybe selection for the Lions, mainly because I think they're probably going to be looking to be playing expansively against Australia. That's their strength. That's what they have. They want to be playing fast. The fitness levels of this team are insane, as a side note. I think it probably goes understated because, you know, we're watching a Lions tour and we're just seeing who's playing this and that. But I think that's something that's underlying, and as I wrote in my notebook, is that their fitness rates of this team is great. The speed at which they're playing consistently is great. But with that, I do think Tom Curry got lost in the sauce a little bit at moments in this game. He's still, there's nothing against him. He's still an excellent player, but it wasn't his best performance. And it really, I think, makes you question who's going to be playing in this 6 shirt for the Lions tests. I think Ty Byrne wasn't the best at 6 last weekend. Ollie Chesham's another option. But the more I thought about it as the game went on, I think the best thing to do is maybe playing Jack Conan at 6 and have Henry Pollock playing at 8. That's what I would do at this stage. I think that's probably the most fascinating. You'd have a flair and the running ability of Pollock, but you'd also have a bit of a bruiser playing in that blindside flanker, and someone who also has an incredibly high work rate in Jack Conan. Hugh Jones, I think, was good. It was good to see from his injury that he had the pace on that intercept return to go the full length. I think he's probably not got a huge amount of worries left about that calf injury, or fingers crossed about it, but good to see him playing fully there. But at the moment, for me, I think Ringrose's performance last weekend against the Force was really standout. So that fight for that 13 shirt is really fascinating for me as well. But anyway, it's getting late here, guys. I'm trying to keep this as short as possible, as I've got work again tomorrow. Probably do a bit more of an in-depth video on Saturday, talking about the game against the Tars. I think there's a real interesting selection to go with the Tars game. At this stage, I think I would love to see Marcus Smith get a full 80 minutes. As a side note, I think Finn Smith did excellently coming off the bench, barely made any mistakes. But to give Marcus Smith at least a chance in this tour, I would like to see him have a full 80 minutes. As I've said in previous videos, I think Marcus Smith very much relies on chemistry with surrounding teammates of him. So look to see Marcus Smith get a full 80 minutes next weekend. Blair Kinghorn, I expect him to probably be starting next weekend as well. That's going to be really fascinating to see how he slides into this team as well. So yeah, lots of interesting things to talk about and for it to come on the weekend. And we've also got the Wallabies going against Fiji, which I'm going to try and do a video for. But yeah, thanks for tuning in, and see you in the next one.